as far as we can tell, there are no exceptions unless somebody has actual brain injury. But for anybody that has dealt with a wide variety of horrible, chronic, years-long types of experiences, they all can move through it and can change things pretty quickly in a matter of several weeks, a couple of months, if they have the desire. But it goes back to this idea, they have to have the hope that they can do it, and they have to have a sense that this was going to be beneficial for them. Once they latch on to the hope and the idea that this will be supportive, there's no stopping them.
Welcome back. We have Dr. Gray Otis with us. We're going to be going through chapter 3. This is the book Key Core Beliefs, and this whole chapter is on relationships, which I'm very interested about. I'm really excited to go over this chapter, have you dive into this, especially how relationships shape our key core beliefs. Can you start us off?
Yeah, and they do start off very early. In fact, as before a child is born, probably, but at least as they come into this life, they're picking up cues and learning things from the very beginning of their birth. But the interactions with their parents, first off, or guardians, and then others that interact with them, friends or siblings, really impact how we start to see ourselves. And we're looking for cues from others. We say that parents are the first most important cues because the child initially starts out thinking that they're part of their mother and their dad. And then they start to say, oh, wait a minute, I've got this
Got my own identity.
Yes,
right.
But it takes a while.
Right.
And it's an evolving process. But as parents, for example, are encouraging, the child is going to develop more positive beliefs about themselves. Likewise, in a different sort of way, if the parents have a lot of conflict or there's conflict in the home, the child will start to have some concerns and questions about who he is or she is and how that's playing out. And none of this has to make any sense. In fact, it doesn't to children, but it's still having an impact on them.
Still affecting them.
Yeah. And then as they continue on, for example, into school, the most innocuous statements can come across in different ways. For example, hey, you're doing really well in this exercise today, Mary. And Mary has a positive belief about herself. Hey, yeah, I'm pretty smart.
Right.
Likewise, a teacher might pass by and say, well, John, you just need to work a little harder to get this down. And he may totally misinterpret that and create a mistaken key core beliefs that,
right.
I'm not smart, I'm dumb, I'm slow. And if those kinds of beliefs get reinforced one way or the other, it starts to affect how the individual child and later the adolescent and later on throughout our lifespan, the adult sees themselves.
Yeah. And it's interesting that that person could have the best of intentions. It's like, hey, you need to work harder. She's trying to give him some constructive feedback to benefit the child. But if they have a filter or if they see that wrong in that one instance, it can change all sorts of things, it sounds like.
It really does, oddly enough, make all the difference.
Right.
And again, a lot of it is mistaken, misunderstandings, misinterpretations.
Right.
But it doesn't make any difference until the child starts to recognize how, they need to look for that positive feedback loop to strengthen their beliefs.
Right. It makes me think, especially as toddlers, you go from them being immobile to mobile, and all of a sudden they're being told so many more times, no, stop, oh, careful.
Yes.
Even just that transition, making sure we're doing it in a way that isn't shaming the child, or, these different ways. I don't think we realize to the extent as parents how much of an impact we have in their character development, even within the first 3 years of life.
Absolutely. And it continues on, but that first 3 years, like you said, is often crucial to, for example, the child seeing his life as unsafe, his world to, he's keep telling, don't do that. And they start to say to themselves, without a conscious thought, of course. I'm unsafe, or my world is unsafe.
Right.
Likewise is, well, honey, you fell down, but keep on going.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, you're tough. You got this.
yeah,
Yeah.
you got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the child responds to that. So it's really important for all of us to be kind of aware as we're interacting with anybody as to what kind of messages are we sending to them in terms of, particularly, again, the context of feedback.
Wow. So in all of this, how can we overcome these negative interactions that we've had in life?
Well, it's a challenge, and unfortunately, a lot of times people carry these kinds of beliefs right through their adolescent years into their adult years, and they're not even aware that they have them. And so, again, one of the most important issues is to have positive relationships, to seek out positive and informative and constructive feedback, but also to question, for all of us to question when we have a belief about ourselves, particularly in the context of, I can't do this, I'm incapable, to recognize that let's challenge that belief. Is it accurate? Because many of them are mistaken, and then we can do something about them, as we talked about earlier.
Wow, that's impressive that we can be able to overcome these, even if we have these negative interactions, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, I had this negative interaction, another one and another one and another one, and they all of a sudden start thinking maybe that's outside of my control. And what you're trying to say is, no, it's not. It's actually within your control to rewrite the script, rewrite the story in your head, and then it can re-affect how that relationship will keep going.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's kind of interesting. One of the things that we'll talk about later is the fact that if I can empathize with others, I can better understand them. And simultaneously, I can also better understand myself. It's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And the answer is both.
And both. Wow. My next question is, how do core beliefs process our experiences?
Yeah. This is a really interesting aspect of core beliefs. We all have known for years that we filter any kind of event or experience through our mind. Okay, and so what we do is we have a perception of something, and then it immediately is taken in. We hear it, we see it, whatever, and it immediately goes through our limbic system, the emotional center of our brain. That's part of our fight, flight, freeze response. Right. Okay. And then we go on and work through it in our rational cognitive prefrontal cortex. Now, all of this is important in terms of core beliefs, because the core belief as we perceive something is kind of almost the first step in processing it. So we're always going to process every experience in our lives, but those core beliefs kind of act as a filtering mechanism. And if we have predominantly positive core beliefs, we'll see experiences quite differently than if we have a negative core belief. And particularly if it's tied to prior experiences in our relationships with others. So we try to make sense out of our interactions, out of what's going on in our lives. And one of the ways we do it is by employing either conscious or, more commonly, subconscious core beliefs to kind of get an understanding of what's going on. And if the beliefs are predominantly negative, well, there's a very good chance we're going to misinterpret an awful lot of experiences as our core beliefs filter those.
Wow. And I think you can see that when you see two individuals or a group of people go through the exact same experience and they're all reacting to it completely differently. It's like, how can a group of people experience the same thing and have such different outcomes? It's because we all have these filters that have been, that we've decided to have a part of us from the beginning, or maybe it's a subconscious, right? But either way, it's a part of us. Yes. And we're reacting to the exact same situation very differently because of that.
Actually, we talk about the fact that not only two people looking at the same experience and interpreting it quite differently or processing through it quite differently, it's also true of the individual. An individual, depending on what active core beliefs are going on at that moment in time, can significantly change how they perceive things.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, tell us more about that.
Well, I give the example of my sister. She lives about an hour away, and every once in a while she shows up kind of unexpectedly at our house. She's always welcome.
Okay.
And, I just use some of the examples that, for example, if I have a good, upbeat relationship with my sister and I see her car pull up, well, I'm going to process that through my core beliefs. I'm a caring, good brother. And, oh, there's my sister.
There's my sister.
Good to see her. Man, I wonder what she's going to talk about. What is this experience going to be like?
Right. And it's a positive feeling.
It's a positive feeling. I'm already geared to, look forward to having a conversation or doing something with my sister.
Okay.
However, if my sister and I have had kind of a falling out recently and she turns up unexpectedly, all of a sudden, my beliefs about myself is maybe I'm not as caring as I think I am, or maybe I have a problem, or our relationship isn't working well. Then I'm kind of set on edge a little bit to kind of wonder, is she
Why
going
is she
to?
here?
Yeah, what's her agenda? What's her mental emotional state? Is she going to be positive, or is she going to kind of scold me for something that I did? And so those are just two of many examples of how one person, same event, but depending on where they are in terms of their core beliefs at that moment in time, can make all the difference in is how they kind of set themselves up to interact with others.
Right. And if your sister shows up and she doesn't know what core belief you have at the time, that could totally change the interaction you have with her.
Yes.
She could show up and be excited to tell you good news. And if you have that negative filter, you're going to be treating her automatically, as a more guarded situation and everything, versus if you're just as excited to see her, she's excited to see you, it could be a beautiful interaction, so I can see how, even as I've, observed interactions with different people, how one person can have such a positive and a person is a negative, and just having those two off, not even the communication with them, but just their filters are off, and it can, that interaction and that dynamic can just fall through.
Yes.
Depending on what state of mind that you're in.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is kind of situational. But for example, if I'd had a rough time with my sister when we were growing up, then I'm always on edge as to what's going to happen next. Because my core beliefs in relationship, not only to her, but to others, are kind of, I'm going to be, as you just said, cautious, guarded,
right.
And I'm already kind of in a defensive position. Whereas if I had a wonderful time growing up with my sister, we had some spats and some problems.
Right.
But generally speaking, here's my sister.
She's here.
Good.
Yes. I'm happy. I'm excited. Yes. And if we don't solve these things between relationships, they can just perpetuate into negative experience after negative experience after negative experience. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. That's what happens. And we find the evidence that what we believe is accurate, even when it's mistaken.
Wow. Okay. There's a part in this chapter that you talk about being powerless. And I think that's a really important topic, especially in relationships. How do we overcome that key core belief?
Yeah, and it's probably the most common core belief. It's also one of the underlying feelings that we have. We'll talk about that in a later episode. But the long and the short of it is we all feel from time to time what is more commonly referred to as helpless. In other words, some situation is presented at us. We don't know what to do about it, or we feel like there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay.
So as we experience feeling helpless or powerless, which is common in a wide variety of circumstances, let me give you an example.
Okay.
I am late to a meeting, and I've got to drive there, and I got to go down a street with a bunch of traffic lights, and they all seem to go red every time I get to the intersection.
Okay.
Well, I'm feeling powerless. And if that's a part of how I see my life, I will reinforce the negative core belief that I'm helpless or powerless. This is particularly true with people that have been victimized. And it's not always the case, but some people would say, I'm a victim. Others don't. They see themselves as rising above whatever has happened to them. We talk in the book about Viktor Frankl, who was a captive in a German concentration camp for a good part of World War II. And
multiple years, right?
Multiple years,
Yes.
and beyond horrible experiences that anybody that hadn't lived with it would not know about it. But he was able, while he was there, to rise above that, to form positive relationships, to be supportive of others, even in dire situations. And because of that, he came through that traumatic experience or series of traumatic experiences really quite well adjusted, and went on to become a noted psychologist and develop his own theory of how people can interact more effectively with others. So it's really important that we pay attention to when we do feel helpless or powerless, to say, is that really true? And to change it to the one belief that I think is most important, and that is, I am capable. Because truth be told, and I ask this question sometimes, you've faced a lot of different challenges in your life. What's the percentage of them that you haven't been able to work through sooner or later?
Right.
And the answer usually is 95 to 100%.
Right.
Yeah, we're not helpless. We're not victims. We don't have to define ourselves that way. And if we understand that we're pretty resilient, and yes, most importantly, we're capable of dealing with tough stuff and getting through to the other side, usually in a pretty good way. And if we can take that positive core belief and really make sure that that's what's underlying how we're particularly interacting with others, when there's a problem or maybe some argument or whatever, wait a minute, I am not helpless, I am capable, and I can work through this with this person. And so that's so important in terms of our relationships and how they continue to reinforce, we hope, positive core beliefs.
That is really good to know. And I think even as we say, in the past of the chapters, the I am statements, there's lots of people saying, I am a victim.
Yes.
And it's like, maybe that person or yourself have been victimized by something, but labeling yourself as a victim is almost taking away that power. I'm a victim instead of I am victorious. I can overcome. I can step out of this. I can overcome this, And so, like you said, it's not benefiting the person when they label their core identity as a victim, because that breeds this feeling of powerlessness, It
really does. And that's so important. And so many people that have been through horrible experiences and have been victimized, when they change from I'm a victim to I have been victimized, then they can work through that and really find out the internal strength that they have, the resilience and the amazing abilities that they have to not only move through and beyond past experiences, but also to become the person they really want to be.
Wow.
And who wants to be a victim, as opposed to who wants to be a courageous individual that can solve problems and is a very capable person. That's what we all want, and that's what we all deserve.
Yes. And I think on this, there's a deep concept of fault versus responsibility. Something may not have been your fault. If you were victimized by something, it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to take responsibility of your own heart and healing. It's like only you can heal your own heart.
Yes.
And to be able to have someone realize that there's such a difference in that. It's not your fault that it happened, but it is your responsibility to heal. Then I think there's empowerment there. You take back that, you're choosing to act instead of be acted upon, and that's where control comes back into your life.
Yeah. And the other thing is, it's very natural. We talk in medical science about homeostasis. That just means that no doctor ever healed a broken bone. The bone was set and the bone healed itself. Well, I think that's true of not only our physical bodies and also our brains, but also our minds and how we interact with the world around us. And so to change that from saying, for example, one of the things I hear quite frequently, I'm broken. No, you're not broken. Yes, you have been injured, but any injury can be healed. If we cut ourselves, that sooner or later, if we get the proper attention, it will heal itself, okay? And that's true of our mind as we strive to let things be in their natural healing process and move beyond any kind of negative core belief that would be kind of impeding that natural process to heal.
Yes. Do you have any advice for maybe someone that's trying to help a person that sees themselves as the victim? They're in this state. They're not seeing that they're this far in the victim mindset. Do you have any advice on how to help those people come out of that?
It's really challenging, and I would just say, first and foremost, as is true in my professional practice as well as my personal life, we all need to be heard and understood in a kind of an environment of not being judged. And so people need to be able to tell their stories. And so they need somebody to hear them and not give advice, but just hear them and to kind of confirm that they're trying to understand, although nobody can fully understand another person. And then, as I said, not giving advice, because advice almost is a judgment type of thing. Well, this is what you ought to do. Most people that have been through these horrible experiences don't need that. But if a person really has been heard and understood and accepted, one of the things that a friend can do or a family member can do is to recognize their skills, their abilities, particularly their resilience, to kind of focus, change the focus of what happened to them to a focus on how amazing they are. Because, I've never met anybody, despite whatever problems that they might have, that aren't somebody that really should be honored and should be appreciated and should be noted for their courage and their resilience. And I think those kind of positive feedback messages can make all the difference as somebody engages those natural healing processes. And then to encourage them that they can heal and that they're going to have people that care about them and want to be with them and are supportive of them.
Okay, so now that we've talked about negative core beliefs and how we become aware of them and change them into positive core beliefs, my question now is, what are the ways we can strengthen our positive core beliefs?
We can't say enough about practice. Okay. So we know that we have to be aware of the negative belief. We have to devise an alternative desired belief. Then we have to act on it, and then we have to practice it. And that practice requires us to focus our attention. It's not something that we can do every once in a while. It's certainly not something we can do inconsistently. We have to kind of have a continual focus in our mind that I can do something that maybe was problematic, or I can overcome past experience by acting and practicing in a given way.
Okay, so really bringing it to the forefront of the brain.
Yeah.
Really trying to, okay.
Good way to put it. Bring it to the forefront of the brain. In the book, we talk about the story of an individual that didn't have a whole lot of education, but she had this very strong interest in horses. She just loved horses, and she was really good working with horses. Okay. And one day, the thought crossed her mind that, gee, I think I could write a book about horses that might be very helpful for other people that have horses or are interested. And then immediately her mind went back to, oh, I don't have the education. I could never do that. That's just not, something that was even possible.
All these negative, multiple, not just one, multiple, boom, 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 negative.
Yes.
Negative thoughts, okay.
And she basically stopped for a moment because she had some experience with core beliefs. And she said, well, wait a minute. Is that really accurate? Am I absolutely sure that I could not write a book? And so she said, well, you know what? To herself, I'm going to act on it. I'm going to write a paragraph or two about something I think is important for people to know about how to care for horses in a loving, caring way. Okay. And so she did. Well, one paragraph led to the next. And every day she decided that she was going to spend a certain period of time, not a lot of time, but she's going to write just a little bit more. She found herself writing and revising and whatever. But within a given period of time, she was really focused on the belief, hey, I have something to say and I can do this. I can write this. And she eventually did write a book. Did. And it was published, and it was helpful for many people that cared about horses. Wow. That's incredible. And the fact that she could have just dismissed that. It could have just been a
nope. Oh, I could never write a book, and there's so many people
Yes.
like that in any regard. Oh, I'm interested in this. Oh, I could never do that. I'm interested in this. Oh, there's no way I could have that opportunity.
Yep.
Instead of saying, why not? Let's challenge that. Why not? I mean, how amazing could we, if we were as parents instilling, that belief in anyone, but especially our kids, when kids really are at that, oh no, I don't know if I could do that. Why couldn't you? Wow. That's a cool story. That's a really cool story.
That's exactly so important. And it is this idea that we focus our attention, we act, and then we continue to act or practice as we continue to move our lives forward.
Wow. Okay. My next question in this chapter is, how do we see things differently through positive core beliefs? We have positive core beliefs. You've talked about the filter of seeing, negative core beliefs. We have this filter and it can turn out very negative in relationships and in all regards. So how do we see things differently when a person does have a positive core belief?
Well, it's interesting. I had my own personal experience with this. Once a person starts to develop a better sense of not only their positive core beliefs, but how they're seeing themselves as individual, we call it that self-belief identity that is a combination or accumulation of all of our core beliefs. When we shift out of having a lot of negative beliefs kind of dominate those filters and shift over to the positive ones, boy, life becomes a little bit more, at least for me, in technicolor. I started to notice things that I'd never noticed before.
Really? Like what?
Well, I would go by a beautiful flower arrangement, and before I would see, oh, that's a flower arrangement. Mm-hmm. And now I was actually looking at individual flowers.
Observing, taking in almost.
Yeah.
Taking in the experience.
And of course, the most important part of all of this is how I started to see others. Somebody put it this way, that he could look at somebody and really see not how they looked, but who they were. Wow. And that kind of happened to me. It just changed how I interacted with others. I became more upbeat, and I smiled a lot more.
It's almost a deeper way of living.
Yes.
Instead of a surface, I go through every day, I'm here, I'm, just routine. You're almost, you're experiencing life on a different level, it sounds like.
Experiencing life on a different, higher, more enjoyable level that really brings more joy and peace and contentment to how we live and a greater sense of personal fulfillment. It does make all the difference.
Okay, so we've talked about at this point, changing negative core beliefs to positive core beliefs, but can everyone replace negative core beliefs? Or are some that are just so deeply rooted or having such an effect on someone that's not possible?
We haven't found that person.
Okay.
We have worked, I and my colleagues have worked with hundreds and hundreds of individuals. We've never found anybody that could not have the ability to change negative beliefs to positive core beliefs.
And that's despite anything they've been through. And you're specifically, trained in treating trauma.
Yes.
So you are seeing people that have gone through severe trauma. And you're
Yes.
saying even those people have been able to replace their negative key core beliefs with positive key core beliefs.
As far as we can tell, there are no exceptions unless somebody has actual brain injury. But for anybody that has dealt with a wide variety of horrible, chronic, years-long types of experiences, they all can move through it and can change things pretty quickly in a matter of several weeks, a couple of months, if they have the desire. But it goes back to this idea, they have to have the hope that they can do it, and they have to have a sense that this was going to be beneficial for them. Once they latch on to the hope and the idea that this will be supportive, there's no stopping them. And they really move forward. But there are no exceptions as far as I know.
Wow. I hope that people can understand the depth of what you just said, saying anyone can heal. That's
Yes,
what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, any broken bone can heal.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, we know that there are severe things that can happen to the body. And in almost every case, those injuries can be healed. Right. It's true of our brain, the neural pathways there. It's true of our mind and our interface as to how we see the world around us.
Wow. So, in everything that we've talked about up until this point, how can we take everything that you've talked about and build great relationships?
It's one of my most fun topics because I think, again, our core beliefs are largely determined and come out of our relationships with others. And often people think, well, gee, what is a relationship that really is fun and enjoyable? And this came years ago when I was working with couples, and somebody would say, well, I just don't love her anymore, or I fell out of love with him. And that kind of bothered me, and I said, well, what really makes a relationship highly functional and enjoyable?
Right.
And so we came up with 5 qualities of what we determined a great relationship is based on. And again, GREAT is an acronym. And so the G stands for genuine. The R stands for respectful. The E stands for empathetic. The A stands for accepting. And last T stands for trustful. And I probably need to explain each of those.
Yes, I'd love to hear more about each of them.
Well, actually what we do is ask people to ask themselves some questions about each of these 5 qualities. So for the first question is, how genuine am I? Am I responsible? Am I honest? Am I trustworthy? Am I reliable? All of these things lend itself to being a person who is a genuine person. And this is so important because when we have a relationship with somebody, we can kind of detect, are they being genuine with us? And if it is, we kind of get a little bit more comfortable with them. So it's an important question for all of us to address from time to time, particularly in any given relationship. So how genuine am I with my partner or my child or my older relative or my work associate or my friends? If we're trying to make an impression on somebody, well, maybe that's not quite as genuine as we'd like to be.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one is to be respectful, and this has a very specific meaning. It just means that we're respectful of the other person's right to make their own choices.
Oh, okay.
Particularly when we don't agree with them. So a person that is in the realm of being respectful is a person that says, okay, you have the right to make your choices. You're a person in your own right and have the ability to choose. I may not agree with your choices, but I'm respectful that you have that ability and it's your right to make those choices for yourself.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't realize that when you don't have that respect, that goes into the idea of manipulation. These relationships, and I don't think a lot of people realize that they're being, manipulated in certain regards. But if someone truly respects you, they will allow you to have your agency and act in what way you deem fit.
Yeah. Exercise your own right to make your own choices. Absolutely. The third quality is to be empathetic, or the question is, how empathetic am I? And this really comes around to 2 basic concepts that we've briefly touched on before. We all want to be heard, and we all want to be understood. When a person is empathetic, they're really deeply listening to what the other person is saying. And they're trying to understand. And the way they confirm that understanding is that they're kind of asking questions. Active listening, confirming, hey, this is what I heard you say. Did I get that? Or is there something I'm missing? Those kinds of affirming questions that helps me better hear, better understand where the other person's from. Empathy, like all of these others, are skills. And it's one of the most valuable skills that anybody can work on. And I think, frankly, I, along with everybody else, needs to continue to work on the skill of being empathetic. The fourth, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and just if we had that in the world in general, all the way from, a relationship to a family to, a community level, to the national level, to the international level, if we could have that ability to empathize more, think about how much more connection we could build.
There's actually been some research. If, for example, two people are having a contentious discussion or maybe an argument, if one of them will practice get out of defending themselves or coming up with the next thing to say and start to really try to hear and really try to confirm that they're understanding, if they go through about 4 iterations of that, they'll get to the point where they're now starting to work together to problem solve. It's great in any kind of couples relationships.
Wow.
Huge factor.
Wow. And I've heard the term seek first to understand and then to be understood.
Exactly right. And that's what's going on.
Yeah.
The fourth quality is somewhat related to respectful, and it's to be accepting. This just means that we accept the other person as they are, because right there at this moment, this is who they are.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be judgmental. We don't have to give advice. One of the things that we talk about quite frequently is the fact that people often have expectations of others. And that just simply means that if I expect something of my partner and she doesn't do what I think she ought to do it, when I think she ought to do it, and how I think she ought to do it, I'm probably going to get disappointed and maybe even resentful. This doesn't work. Now, it doesn't mean that I have to agree with my partner. And it doesn't mean that I can't share what I would like things to be like. Certainly can. But then it's much more of a partnership type of relationship. And she's no longer having to jump through my hoops or meet my expectations, because she knows, and we all know, when we feel accepted, we feel comfortable. And we can now be ourselves a little bit more. And that's so crucial in these kinds of ways to build wonderful relationships.
Right. And who doesn't want to, try to mind read and figure out this person is expecting all of these things from me. And most of the time we're expecting something of someone. We're not actually telling them. It's all these expectations in our own mind. And then we expect them to read our mind, even though we haven't told them what the expectations are. And so it just ends up being this, kind of chaotic mess, instead of just letting go of that and, not having them have to live to a bar or standard that they don't even know exists.
Yeah, I think you've summarized it very well. And again, though, we can be accepting, but we can also express our interest or what we would like to see happen without throwing it into either judgment or expectations.
Right. Interesting.
Last one is to be trustful. It doesn't mean to trust, because if somebody is trustworthy, that's back in genuine. But trustful has a very specific meaning, that we believe the other person is good-hearted and well-intentioned. We don't always act that way, of course, but we believe in the general good nature of the other person, and we act in that way. We kind of hope the best for them and want the best for them. And we are doing that in a kind of a consistent way, so that they kind of know that, they think I'm okay.
Right. Is it almost kind of the term that, you believe the person is acting in good faith? It's like
Yes.
you're here, you're showing up, you don't have some ulterior motive or something, or a different agenda or something. That trust is there.
Yeah. And by converse, if somebody is not genuine with us, we're not going to be trustful that they're good-hearted and well-intentioned and have our best interest at heart.
Right.
So these 5 qualities are things that are really key skills. We can learn how to be more genuine and less kind of leaving things out or being a little less than fully reliable. We can learn how to be respectful of others' ability to make their own choices, even when we disagree with them. We can learn how to be, and this is crucial, more empathetic and understanding. We can learn how to be more accepting and less judgmental. And we can kind of advance the idea that, unless someone is proven that they're not trustworthy, we can be trustful that most people are, and they are, good-hearted and well-intentioned. Yes. When we put all of those things together, we can kind of actually measure how much we care about somebody. And this is kind of an interesting concept. And we'll talk much more about it in chapter 10. But the idea is that we can ask ourselves those 5 questions and then measure how effectively we're doing that and consistently doing that on a scale of 0 to 10. Wow. So what we've learned is 2 things. That the first one is there is no such thing as a single relationship. There's a relationship between me and thee. And your relationship with me is not the same. You're hearing things, perceiving things, understanding
Totally
things.
differently than,
Yes.
okay.
So there's always two relationships. And if I'm going to take ownership and responsibility for my part of any relationship with any person, then I can actually measure how well I'm doing in terms of being genuine, 0 to 10, respectful, empathetic, 0 to 10, accepting,
Yes.
and trustful. And I can kind of help myself get even more effective in my interactions with others based on those scores. What we know is that when an average score is around 8, 8.5, or 9, nobody's perfect, but on a 0 to 10 scale, that 8.5 to 9.5 range, you are doing the best that you can to be a wonderful person. And I like to say to be a caring friend in any relationship. And we'll talk more about how that plays out in terms of the duality of all relationships when we get down the road. But notice, here's the interesting thing. All 5 of those qualities are key core beliefs. I am genuine. I am respectful. I'm accepting.
Yes.
I'm empathetic. I'm trustful. And, oh, by the way, not only that, but as we practice those skills and reaffirm them within ourselves, they have multiple other skills. Like, I am genuine. Well, I'm honest.
Yes.
I'm reliable. I'm respectful. I'm accommodating. I really am there for the other person to try and get where they're coming from.
Yes, it kind of expands all of these.
I'm
Yes.
empathetic. I'm understanding.
Yeah.
I'm an active listener.
Right. Right.
I am accepting. I'm not judgmental.
Yeah.
I am open. I am have the ability to kind of see people as they are. And I'm trustful. Yes, I too am good-hearted and well-intentioned. So all of these are multiple key core beliefs, and as we're aware of them, they reaffirm our ability to interact positively with others and, again, strengthen our own positive core beliefs.
Wow. I love hearing that all of this works together. And I know that as someone really dives into what you have written and what you're explaining, they could rearrange and benefit any relationship they have in their life. Any relationship can be helped by what you've described tonight and the research that you've put into this and the information that you're willing to give people to show them. You can create beauty from wherever you are. You can make it more beautiful.
And each of us has that capability, and I would say the responsibility to incorporate these things if we want to have the life we really want to have.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for diving into chapter 3. Of course, in the book, there's so much more, but we're glad we're able to cover what we did. And we're ready to jump into chapter 4 next.
Sounds good.